All right, are you seeing my slides? Awesome.
We got it.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate the time today to share our journey with you. And that's really how I'm going to name this. We've been on a journey that's multiple years long in two ways, as an organization, as well as on how we deliver training within healthcare. And I'll just preface this with a statement that after these 28 years, I take my role in enabling people to deliver healthcare to patients very seriously. Even though Cardinal Health is not a direct patient giver, we are the support mechanism for many, many hospital systems, pharmaceuticals. We have both medical products. We actually have 2 call centers that deal directly with patients. And so I feel the responsibility heavily to make sure that the folks who work for us have every possible way to succeed and perform their jobs excellently. And so part of that passion that I have for that is what led us to this topic today. So I want to just tell you a little bit about our journey. So in 2017, we had 27 disparate training teams across Cardinal Health, literally in the business, didn't communicate with one another. And we decided to bring all of those together under one center of excellence. And so what you see is kind of how we've laid it out. Each of these academies has a director, and they lead all of the learning business partners in meeting with the business to figure out where the performance gaps are and how we can best support. And in the middle is the Solutions Hub, which is what I lead, which is, it's got an IDD for the enterprise, IDD for businesses. We have creative services, learning operations, logistics, and technology. So it's the central function, if you will, for the COE. This was a big change for a lot of people, but a change for the better. And as I talk about our evolution, you'll see what has created this. I go through this because it's a good context for why we looked at everything that we do and why we said, hey, we've got to stop creating content. And we've got to stop giving people information dumps. And we've got to start thinking about how they do their jobs better. So in this evolution, we had no centralized model. Many of us, ourselves and our customers, thought of us as school. Let's send people to school. They would order up I want a test. I want a certification. I want people to know this. But they never actually told us why. What do you need them to do with that knowledge? What are the skills that you need them to have? Or, on the other hand, many of us across our COE came from what we call a content-driven model. The SME would say, here's my 100-slide deck. Go do something with that. Make it good. Make people want to listen to that, which overwhelmed people, as many of you know. And again, the focus was on knowledge. And so in 2018, we started having some hard philosophical conversations about, is this really the way we want to operate? Or do we want to do something different? Do we want to do something that will move the needle for the organization and our patients that we serve? And again, these LBPs, a couple of things that we noticed, a lot of order taking, right? I called it the training deli counter. People would order up their sandwich, and we'd make the sandwich. And so what we said was, let's do fewer projects and do more programs. Let's consult. And before we ever get started, ask, what are you trying to change? What behavior are you trying to change? What skill are you trying to build? What knowledge do they need to get that skill? We had very few ways of measuring any kind of impacts, which is not unusual in our industry, right? How do you measure that the correlation between the training that they took and the business impact that it had? We're still in that process. Trust me, I don't have all the answers. We are still working through that, but we're finding new ways to do that. And a lot of the LBPs that came into our COE were predominantly classroom facilitators. And so these skills of consultation and things were not things that they naturally had. And so how are we going to develop them, right? How would we develop our own people so that they could deliver better for the organization? And the IDDs were doing everything from building nice PowerPoints, working on a model of here's your learning objectives, tell, show, do. Okay. And so not much interactivity necessarily in a lot of the classes, a lot of information dumps. And so there was a big need to make a change. And so one of the things we just started to do very early on was say, well, if we're one COE, everything at least ought to look the same. And so we created some templates and some toolkits to do that. And so the IDD resources were the first part of this COE that I felt gelled, that came together as one team. And when we did that, we set up a mission and a vision, because I said, listen, if we're going to change how this whole COE does stuff, we're going to be the drivers of that. And so what we wanted to do was really up our game on instructional design. How do we provide the best design and development services for Cardinal Health, which are really going to help people do their job better, not know more, not have more information than they know what to do with, but really do their job better. And so this bottom question, how do we change our culture, our mindset, and our capabilities so that we can say we drove a business impact? And that was huge, right? Just to come to that question. And how do we do that? And so we really started thinking about that as a leadership team, myself and my 4 managers at the time. So then what happened was one of the people on my team said, hey, I've read this book by Kathy Moore. It's called Map It. And one of the things that we learned pretty quickly about it was we weren't being very strategic about how we were going about our jobs. We weren't really going out and consulting with people, and from the LBP's point of view, the learning business partners, or from the IDD's point of view, right? We were taking in content, but we weren't stopping to say, what's the performance that you want to get? Well, I knew that this was going to be a long haul, right? So the first people you got to get on board of the leadership team. So our own leadership team read the book and we discussed it and we really dug into it. And of course, there's some things that we didn't feel were exact fit because Kathy Moore was an external consultant in many of the situations. And everything we were trying to do was internal. We're internal consultants, if you will. So we had to make that switch. But then what we did, I said, I need to take this to the directors, those academy directors I mentioned a while ago, and my vice president, and we have to get them on board. And I knew reading the book together and discussing it would do that. And so sure enough, that's what we did. We did book clubs. And then my vice president said, this is the secret sauce. This is the secret sauce, Pam. You've got to do book clubs now for the entire COE. Because once we get people talking about this and we get people really invested in it, they will say to themselves, oh my gosh, we are doing this all wrong. So in essence, we bought books for everyone, and I'll show you a slide on this. But at the end of the day, what really it started doing was changing mindset, changing culture to say, it's not enough just to deliver information. It's not enough to just even build activities. What if the activity doesn't match the performance that they need to do on the job? And so we invested, right? $7,000. My project manager and I met with Kathy Moore. We talked through it. I told her I was going to build a facilitator guide for the book clubs, which, by the way, we'll be sending out at the end of the presentation. So we had facilitated discussion groups every week for the book clubs, talking about specific questions and how we as a COE could apply them. We also knew that we needed some, whatever you want to call, early adopters, right? People who help drive change. And so we selected special IDDs and LBPs to go through Kathy Moore's training on both how do you write scenario-based workshops, as well as how do you have consultative conversations. And then all the time that everybody invested came to about $375,000 because we have 130 people in our COE. So it's a lot of time to invest in people attending a book club every week or every 2 weeks. So that was kind of how we decided we were going to change the culture, get everybody talking about the same stuff. And so what we came up with was we had some learning as we went through this process. And that's what I really want to share with you. And you'll notice it says PBLF, Performance-Based Learning Framework. One of the first things we found was that the LBPs would go out and have conversations with people and say, we're going to map it with you. And everybody would be like, what are you talking about? You're going to map it. What's map it? And so we said, why don't we come up with our own name for this? So we call it the Performance-Based Learning Framework. But the first thing, and I'm still on the track to talk to my my vice president into changing our name from learning and development to training and performance, but we're not there yet. But we have to become performance consultants. The LBPs, the learning business partners, when they meet with people, have to stop taking orders and they have to actually talk about performance. We have to talk about metrics. We have to ask people, what's your goal in asking for this training? And believe it or not, we've asked a lot of people in the business, what is your goal for wanting and needing this training? They can't answer the question. They don't know. And so as we take them through the process, guess what we've discovered many times? It's not a training problem. And so as we go through, we've eliminated a lot of work that we would have done, but we fixed their problem. We've come up with this performance support. We've come up with a job aid. And that's what's really cool. I'm going to take a pause. I know I'm talking a lot. I want to also let you know that if you have any questions as we go through, feel free to put them in the chat. Mark will interrupt me, which he has full license to do, and we'll talk back and forth between us. One of the things that I thought was really telling about the Kathy Moore book that I think might be something everyone can implement is when you go and you talk with the business, don't use training words. Don't use course and content. Use business goal, use performance, use metrics, talk their language. And when you do that, you have a completely different conversation. It's amazing, right? But when you bring up course or you bring up SME or you bring up content, you put yourself back in that place of, oh, they're just the people we give the stuff to and they make it pretty and they make it nice, okay? Always focus on what behavior you're looking for. What do you want them to do that they've never done before? What do you want them to do differently than what they're doing today? Those are my two main questions. And one of the things that we've actually done is we've put that on our intake form. What is the goal? What do we want the people to do? What do we want them to do differently? And if that stays blank, sometimes we don't do the work. We go back to the LBP and we say, you haven't done your due diligence. You go find these things out, and then we'll start building training for you. So it's really important. And a lot of folks think, oh, I do the metrics at the end, or, oh, I look for the results at the end. And that's when I can find out what I need to know to show the business value. You have to start at the beginning. You have to start at the very beginning with the initial conversations. And that's how you get to the metrics at the end. One of the things we learned from our IDDs was most of them spent their time culling through a whole bunch of content, trying to find the nuggets that we needed to share with people. No more information dumps. Let's stop doing that to everybody. It's just annoying to the learners, and it's a hunt for them. It's like a scavenger hunt. Where's the nuggets that I need to do my job? I got to go find them in all of this content. Identifying that performance problem before you build the solution is what's critical. The solution has to match the behavior change that the business wants. In the chat, I noticed somebody was talking a lot about using activities and realistic scenarios with their salespeople and how it was making a difference. Bravo for you. Bravo for you, because that is exactly what we started doing. We've got to have realistic activities. We have to provide what people need in the flow of work, spaced over time. And that's the only way you're going to get behavior change to stick, right? And one of the things, and this was the hardest jump for my IDD team, they wanted to tell everybody up front, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we define that. Here's your learning objectives, because that's how they were all taught, right? ADDIE model. And I said, you know what? Let's blow that out of the water. Let's just put people into an activity day one. It's very controversial. I don't know if you know that, but if you deal with instructional designers, they think that's very controversial, that we would just immediately go into an activity. So I called it activity first design. And I actually put a little incentive program together to get designers trying it to see. And I said, and I actually had a conversation with one of our vice presidents who said, you can't do that. I said, oh, yes, I can. I'm going to just have an activity up front. We're not going to tell anybody anything up front. And guess what? People like it better. They're more engaged. They want to learn because they're engaged instead of passively listening. And again, make stuff harder than you normally do. Make it challenging. Everybody was like, oh, people are going to balk if you make this hard. I'm like, we got comments back on our first unconscious bias course that it was so thought-provoking They enjoyed it. They thought it was challenging. It was the best training they had ever had on any topic because they weren't passive. And so this is what's really important, folks, is you really got to engage your IDDs. So then what we found was, again, yes, we have a chat.
Before we, we do have a question. I just want to make sure we don't miss in the chat
please.
before you move to the next one. So Mike Willis asks, says, love the realization that not all performance issues are training issues. I love that too. Have you woven some of that identification of the root cause of performance issues into your leadership development programs?
Interesting. No, we haven't. We haven't gotten that far. It's a great point. What we have done is converted some folks. Again, I think of this as converting leadership. And so we had a head of our HR services center who was the recipient of one of these. Hey, after we did the map it's not about training. It's about this, this, and this. They implemented those and it fixed the problem. And so now we have a zealot, right? So we've converted some folks to this thought process that just because you have a performance issue does not mean it's a training issue, right? It does not mean that it's because people don't know what they're supposed to do. And this is what we talk a lot about as a group. Knowing does not equal doing. And so how do we help make people transition from this? They need to know things, but then how do they apply them? How do they do them? But that's a great call out. You know, we're still working on a leadership development program around accountability, empowering employees. I think the closest thing we probably have to your question is our white belt, green belt training, where they really get to root cause. We have that for leaders. And so hopefully if they're thinking that through, they're thinking, well, maybe not everything is a training problem. Maybe there are other root causes. But interestingly enough, in the situations where this has occurred and we've realized it wasn't necessarily a training issue, what it really turned out to be many times is either a process issue or a performance support issue. I only do that process once a year or twice a year or once a month. And when I do that process, I need support. Then I don't need an online module I took 6 months ago. And so that's how I would answer that question. Any other questions, Jill?
I don't think so. Just some further.
We're going to have a breakout to talk about all this. Don't you worry. We're going to have a breakout session. All right.
All right. So, carry on.
Carry on. So how do we operationalize it? So again, one of the things that we realized was, you know, we're not outside consultants. We need to take the concepts from Kathy Moore's book and really make it work for us. So we started, the first thing we said though is these action mapping that she talks about is critical, which is exactly what Mark is talking about, the root cause analysis, or how do we get to what are the actual things that people aren't doing correctly, or that the new thing that we need them to do, right? And so we started looking at action mapping tools. We actually use Lucidchart to draw out our action maps. Interestingly enough, I asked leaders for 60 minutes to do one of these. Well, they were like, oh my God, what do you need an hour for, right? Well, guess what? When we got into the action mapping, we spent 2 hours and they didn't care. They were like, let's stay here. This is important. We're figuring this out. So I think you know, you have to kind of make people understand that you're trying to help them solve their problem rather than just take their training order. And I think that's the important thing. One of the things we realized is that, again, we had to build the muscle, the consultative muscle. We didn't have that in both the IDD world and the LVP world. So we immediately we need to create some training around questioning and consultative skills. We did workshops where people would practice these various skills and talk about them. Again, you not only had a culture shift here, but you had a skill development that needed to happen. We had all this focus on the IDD team on activity first, branching scenarios, prototyping rather than build the whole thing and realize it doesn't fit the problem, which was happening. And so the branching scenarios has been a big one. Realistic, interactive branching scenarios that people can really latch on to. And in fact, I'm going to show you one of our success stories related to that. But that's where people feel challenged. it's kind of the way I explain it to the business folks is it's like the choose your own adventure game, right? So you go in and you get this choice. And if you don't choose the right thing, you kind of go down the wrong path, but you can get back on the right path. But these scenarios, the more realistic they are to the work environment, the better you're going to have a behavior change and an outcome. We said, let's change the brand. Again, we didn't want people calling it Map It, so we renamed it PBLF. And one of the things I think was really important to our culture change was that our vice president at our town halls had a segment of the town hall where people would share their best practices related to this effort. So how was everybody in the COE adopting this change? And I think that's important. First of all, it showed his recognition of the importance of this. It also really led people to go, wow, I know that person and they tried it and it worked. I think I can do it. So again, talking about culture change, that was something I think made a big difference. Right. Before we move into this, any questions or anything on the chat? Okay.
Not seeing anything at the moment.
Awesome. So in order to do all of that, we created an adoption team and a tiger team. The adoption team was really there to map out who does what in this kind of a world. We've got a one-pager on that that'll come out after the session today, just to see how you might meet out who's doing what in this process. Who should be leading the action mapping sessions, who should be doing the design work, who should be doing all of that. And then we also wanted to build templates and training, things to help support people in adopting the change. And so we had a tiger team of folks who spent some time doing that as well. So I think these teams were very important because everybody felt like they were part of it, and they were mixed teams. We had LBPs and IDDs working together to say, what do we need if we really want to be consultative, if we really want to be about performance, what kinds of things do we need to support us? And so some things have changed, right? I actually hear learning business partners say, well, where's the employee's performance gap? And then I'm like the Grinch, my heart goes 3 sizes larger, right? The LBPs are setting goals for the business, and they're meeting with them quarterly to do quarterly business reviews. And so they have these relationships. One of the things we found, what was very interesting, the people who had the hardest time making this change from content to performance were people who had long-standing relationships with the business. And they were like, how do I tell them I'm going to talk to them differently? How do I tell them that? Because the business people would be like, we've been meeting for 5 years. You've never asked me these questions before. Why are you asking me these questions now? And so they had to learn how to explain, hey, I'm changing my culture. I want to be here to help you with your performance. I'm not just here to deliver a class. And when they did that, the business perked up and they said, wow, this is really something. And remember, these folks are from all different walks. We train pharmacists, we train call center people, we train warehouse employees. I mean, these are all different types of leaders that we're working with. And having the LBP and the IDD work together before a solution is offered, right? Because one of the things that we were doing, and I know a lot of folks on the call probably do this, is, okay, that sounds like an online module, we'll do that. Or, I think we need a class on that. And one of the things that we really took to heart in Kathy Moore's book was hold your solution. Really understand the problem, really understand the performance gap before you create or talk about creating any type of training solution, because you've got to have that level of understanding before you could actually understand what kind of solution would work. Some of the things that have happened for the IDDs, again, this activity first design, this crazy foreign notion to them, they've really started embracing this, where they'll say, hey, Pam, I did an activity first design. They really get excited about doing that, trying something new. Focusing our with intention, the types of things that we create have interactive learning design that's scenario based to real job application. Designing, starting with a performance goal rather than a conversation with a SME. And that's a big one. I guarantee you, in all of my years at United Healthcare, everything was driven by the SMEs, right? Their opinion, their content that they had, it was all about content. So now it's about, well, what do you want what do we need the business to do differently? Okay, Mr. Smee, come and talk to me. I need you, but you're not going to drive my solution, right? And we have to include the employee in our design. So this is something that's come a lot, really. It's like a 180-degree turnaround, which is, it isn't just the business leader's ideas, or it isn't just the SME we need to listen to. We need to go talk to the feet on the street. We need to go talk to the person who's doing this job and say, why aren't you performing? What is in your way? And how can we help bridge that gap with skill building or knowledge? And when the IDDs take that approach, what we're finding is we're seeing business results. We're seeing impacts. We're seeing people changing behavior, which is not easy to do, but you've got to have that perspective. Anything on the change and the evolution? Any other questions on that? All right, Jill, we're ready for a breakout. Let's let them talk about this. What I'm really interested in these breakouts is, how do you think you would need to move the needle to get more performance-based in your organization? Stop talking about tests and certifications. Stop talking about content. Let's talk about how to make people better at their job. And what would you have to do in your organization to make that happen? And I think we'd love to hear back from folks when they come back about the ahas from their discussion. So we'll be facilitating a little debrief, if you will. If you'd please nominate a spokesperson, that would be awesome. But here are some of the questions, and Mark, in his mastery of technology, will share these in the breakouts. But here are the questions that we'd like to have your groups talking about. So let's have we'll do the chat question in a second. Let's hear from the folks fresh from the discussions. In the group I was in, we had Joan Salisbury was going to be our spokesperson. Is it, Mark? Can we open up? Can she open up her phone so she can give her?
I'm on.
Yep. Awesome. So Joan, want to give a couple of the things that we talked about on these topics?
Yeah, you were good to keep us on topic, but the things I'm commenting on might not align exactly to the 4 bullets. So we talked about how we like to keep in mind the end first. So what is the win? What does the end evaluation look like? And put that in front of the design, making sure that we achieve that performance before we even start to design. We talked about sustainability and how important that is. Talked about engaging leadership and how having them supporting whatever efforts we make is critical to adaptation. Talked about a lot of things. So,
yeah, I think what I took away from it really was the Karen Barr and Joan, who are both in our group, both had great backgrounds in consulting, so had already kind of started doing a lot of this with their organizations. I might need your help with this, Mark. I don't know who the other presenters are, the other speakers, so hopefully they can all unmute. But who would like to go next from one of the other breakout groups? Spokespeople. What are the ahas that you're from the discussion that you took away?
This is Dawn. I can go.
Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate that.
Yep, no problem. So I think we were all pretty on the infancy stage of performance management. Probably ground zero would be a better way of saying it. But it makes a lot of sense. All of us are not from the medical industry, so how applicable this is to all of us was great. I think for us, it's really asking the question about, what is the impact going to be and what does success look like, and tying things back to the business rather than the education speak or the learners or the training speak that we tend to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things in our group that we talked about as well was how often you find this isn't a training problem. And so that was also a theme, I think, in AHA, that it's like, oh, okay, that's not just organization, that's everybody. Like everything needs to be fixed by training. Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to participate. Who else would like to share from their group any ahas regarding these discussion questions or anything else that you talked about?
This is Mary Rowlands, and we were I was
Hey,
part of
Mike.
the team with Matt and Jean and Joyce. We did talk about the audience, keeping the audience in mind as well, and talking about what success looks like. On the end of it, we also had a conversation around revenue and costs.
Mhm.
Like for example, our organization, we do calculate out the consumption costs and the development cost of training and provide that. Not that we charge back as we're a shared services organization, but just for the awareness to help, I guess, support the conversation, guide the conversation on the importance and what the impact to the organization is.
Mhm.
And on the end, how would you implement the shift? We had a conversation around providing training to our own training teams and how what you had said about training your consultants. This is a conversation we've recently had, and I think that's really important. And we don't do that a lot. And I don't think any of us has really, in our group, we didn't do much of that either. So more interested in hearing more about that. And if anyone on my team, in my group, wants to add anything in I missed, please chime in.
Awesome. Yeah, unfortunately, we find ourselves often as the cobbler's children with no shoes, right? We're all about training the entire organization, but we forget our own people. And that was something that we realized we had to do more of, right? It wasn't enough just to read the book. We had to get into some skills around consultation. It was critical to be able to enable people to have these conversations. Because Joan and Karen on the team I was on were talking about, their years of experience. And with that experience becomes that consultative skill. But not all of our folks had that. And so we had to say, what's our own performance gap? And again, sending people to some of the really specialized Kathy Moore training really helped. Doing the workshops that we had really helped. Other groups, other
Next, I
spokespeople.
think Cindy was going to go.
Awesome. Thank you, Cindy.
I was in a group with Kythie and Silva and Deb Hardison, and we had a couple of different themes that I could share. One was, that it is a massive culture shift, and that people are going to say, why are you talking about performance goals? But we talked about a few things. That one is that if you can do all the heavy lifting up front, in the long term, you are going to get a lot of great performance outcomes. And the other thing is really, having the metrics and things in place, which again takes a lot of work up front to get to those metrics, because they're not just going to fall out of the sky. You are going to have to come up with metrics and have some long conversations and ask some great questions to get those. But once you get those, and people, they're not going to be 100% on your online quiz. They're going to be tied back to business outcomes and enterprise goals. But once you get to those, you are going to be showing your value from performance-based learning, and that's really going to count for something, because you're going to be showing what value you're adding. So that's going to take some more time, but you can, even if some groups don't come along with your performance-based learning, you might be able to even have a control group in that setting and show, like, look what happened with this group that didn't happen with that group. And I'm really doing a lot of education with that, but it is definitely going to be a culture shift, because as you explained, you're moving away from this short order cook taking and not just working to these short objectives, but long-term goals. And being the educator about that is more. But in the long run, it's worth it.
One of the tactics that we've used is, everybody's measuring everything these days, right? So everyone in the business gets that you have to prove why you exist and all of that. And so one of the things we've said is, we want to align with you. So our success relies on your success, which means we have to know what makes you successful. We have to know what your goals are. We have to know what you're trying to do, and we have to align with that. And that has seemed to resonate with some of our business leaders. Is like, okay, they're treating you guys like they treat us. All right, so we need to band together and try to figure out if we've moved the needle, right? And I think somebody else had talked about the opportunity cost of training, right? So one of the things I'll say is, you realize how much time that would take to do what you're talking about. We literally had someone who wanted an 8-hour program, and I was like, times the number of people that you want to do that with, is that really how you want to? And we don't even know it's going to change anything. Let's focus on what we need to change first, and then let's, instead of just ordering up a one-day class, let's really decide what will move the needle. And when you start having those kind of conversations, it really makes a difference. So great conversation. Thanks, Cindy. Appreciate that. Other groups, do we have another one, or is that all of our groups, Jill?
We have like 4 or 5 people volunteering, but also saying that we can move on if time does not allow.
Okay. No, we still have time, don't we, Jill? Or no?
I think we do. Yeah.
All right, we've got time. Let's hear if any ahas that you've had. I'd love to share these, because this is what really helps everybody, is to hear from all the groups and what you've done and how you've tackled this issue.
Okay. Let's see. We've got Heather.
Yeah. So group 2, I'm going to actually jump to our second question.
Good.
And that is really looking at some of those metrics, because we talked about some of the hard metrics, things like speed to resolution, sales closure, sales amounts, goals attained. But then we talked about sort of that more squishy piece of confidence. So confidence indicators and how that has been really valuable for example, the nurses doing continuing ed at Health Partners. And if I get any of these wrong, please correct me, team. But just that it doesn't always have to be about data. It can also be about impact on the learners.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about some of the challenges, change can be scary. And one of the things that you have to do when you're looking at not every solution is training is you might have to look in the mirror. And you might have to realize, as an organization or as a leader, some of those uncomfortable truths. Am I giving my people the support they need? Do they have the tools they need? Do they have clear expectations? Do they know what they need to do? Do they have the tools? Do they have the skills? But also, do they have the knowledge? And then, am I, as a manager or a leader, holding them accountable? Am I using my managerial courage to really set those expectations and to make sure that, again, people are equipped to do what they need to do or what I want them to do. And that can be kind of uncomfortable to have to look in the mirror, and not everything is all about they need more training, right? But sometimes it's these other tools.
I call it the magic pill, the magic training pill. Just give them the magic pill. Yep.
Exactly. Yes. And then number 4, or the last one, implementing the shift. Mike Willis on our team just said, show them the data. That'll solve everything. So, and again, looking at data in different ways, right? How can that data be measured? It doesn't always have to be measured in those strict metrics, but it also can be some of those squishier things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, the gamification tool that we use through Exonify measures increase in confidence. So when you said confidence, it made me think about it. And that's very important when you've got people either on phones or sales reps, nurses. Very important that they feel confident, because that changes the experience of the customer, whoever that customer might be, right? If you've got somebody confident dealing with you. So yeah, I love that. One of the things that I was sharing with the other group was we had some data that just fell in our lap, kind of. We hadn't planned it, but we've rolled out a Richardson sales training, and we did a pre-work that they had to do before the class and then the class. But then the big difference was there's a Richardson sustainment program as well as our gamification platform. And when we put all of that together, we actually saw a difference in quota attainment in the group that went through the whole thing versus the group that just went to the class. And so here you had a great control group that just kind of fell in our lap of, I'm a sales rep, I don't have time to do the pre and the post, I'm not doing it, so I'm just going to do the class. They did not adopt the behaviors. They did not have the success that the groups that did all of the pieces to the training had. So that was a huge data point where everybody kind of sat up and said, holy cow, these guys can really make a difference. But we have to listen, and the people have to do all the parts that they say that we need to do. Do we have another one, Jill? Do we have another group?
We sure do. So, Robin, I know you posted, but you were kind of echoing a theme that had already been covered. Was there more?
Sure. I just one other observation to share. We talked a little bit about, when the organization comes to you with new things that need to be implemented or changes for the organization, that's one thing. But when you have ongoing training programs that you're doing, it's a little bit different, especially when you're bringing new people to the organization and doing onboarding, or just teaching how to do the job. So we talked a little bit about how one organization in our group, for instance, was using training from a process document, just kind of walking through all the steps. Here's how you do it. Let's walk through it. Let's, sort of that tell, show, do model. And trying to change that that's a great performance support tool, but how can we really learn how to do the job and make that more engaging and more effective? And we talked a little bit about using metrics that the organization is already measuring against to bring that in as a way to change up the training and then be able to measure and show the value and worth. And then tied to that was sort of that train the trainer, train the trainers how to train differently to get the better results. So that was an echo theme and a aha from earlier.
Yeah, when you have SMEs delivering training, that's a big hurdle, right? Because they like to go through everything and explain everything. It's their little baby, they don't want to take any content away. I think that's a great realization that you guys have had is that concept of, find a metric or find something that is meaningful already to the business. So when I took over training a call center, they were training a month before they ever put people on the phone. And so we started talking about speed to productivity, very important, so again, those new hires, if you've got new hires in and you've got tell, show, do going on, say, I have a way we probably could get them, operating on their job quicker. That usually gets business leaders' ears to perk up, like, oh, really? You do? Oh, how would you do that? Rather than tell, show, do. What are some things that we could do differently? Well, let's get them practicing from day one. And let's realize what they need to do to improve that skill. And you'll have a more productive employee sooner than you do today. Because waiting a month for a new hire to get on a phone seems pretty excessive. What else?
Steph.
Sure. Hi. Steph Balleghi with General Mills. My partners were Jim and Brenda. And somewhere in translation, the sentiment came out of, so we can never test again. And I said, I think it's a both and. I don't think it's an either or. And so I represent General Mills, and we have really two, I'm going to be very simplistic, two populations. One are our salaried folks who sit in headquarters, and two are our wage folks who do the manufacturing work in our locations. And it is a requirement of OSHA and other government organizations that we have trained them and we have certified them to do the very dangerous jobs that they do. And so, just sort of walk through how, yes, we absolutely do performance-based training. It's very much a watch me do it. Okay, now you're going to do it. I'm going to watch you. Okay, now I'm going to watch you do it. I'm going to do a checklist to make sure you're doing it correctly and safely, et cetera, et cetera. And then I might give you a knowledge exam to verify that you cognitively understand what you physically did as a measure, so that when OSHA or another government body comes, we can say, yeah, we have, this person is operating this machinery safely. And so just the note that these are not two binary things. It is very much a continuum, and both can coexist.
Yeah, I love that. And thanks, Steph, for sharing that. I think what I really like about it is that you're doing the observation checklist, because if I'm OSHA or whatever, I'd rather you did that than a test. I mean, I could pass a test, doesn't mean I can do anything, right? So we have nuclear medicine is one of our customers, a group that delivers, very dangerous isotopes. And they have what they call authorized user training, which is, they have to have all these things authorized to be in a clean room and do all of those things, which are very dangerous. Yes, that's great. What worries me is when I ask the question, well, they can pass the test. Does anybody know, has anybody ever seen them actually do the stuff? And people are like, no, this is all we need to do for OSHA. And I'm like, what? We probably need to know that they can actually do it. That's probably pretty important. Well, we do that separately. It's not really part of the OSHA piece, but to me, it's like, Why would you do one and not the other? You need them both. You need to know, A, do they know the stuff? And B, have we actually seen them do it? Because, if they handle this wrong, very bad things could happen. Do we have any other groups, Jill?
We do. TJ?
TJ, awesome.
Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for asking. In our group, we talked a lot about some of the stuff that we've heard already. So not a lot of really new things, but we did talk about some of the challenges with, getting the business partners aligned and moving us in L&D from order takers to consultants. I mean, that is, I don't want to undermine how difficult it actually is to change a culture of people that are used to just saying, build me an e-learning, build me a video. So that takes some time, and it takes a lot of practice. And it also, for us, at least when I went through it, it took some compromise of I know that you have a business to run and you have timelines, and maybe this is going to take longer than you thought it was going to, or at least that's what's in your head. So sometimes we had to make some compromises to slowly start to chip away at that culture versus going in headstrong and saying, nope, this is how we do things now. At least, again, that helped us. But the other thing we talked about too was just making sure and figuring out the right amount of resources within L&D. So the way that we were set up in the past was very much, we had a team of consultants, we had a team of designers, we had a team of facilitators, and then an operational team that kind of helped run everything. And one of the things, it took us a while to learn. We got good at it after a while, but it took us a while to get to the point where we weren't creating our own bottlenecks of too much stuff coming in and we can't keep up with the demand. So our consultation team is out here talking to business partners, figuring out what they need, coming, and working with them on learning solutions, but not being able to get them through the rest of the system quick enough. So it became, we did quite a bit of work to try to balance that out and really reprioritize some of our work. So eventually we got there. It just took some time.
Great comments, TJ. Thanks. My comment to the one thing is, yes, up front, it might take a little longer. But interestingly enough, again, if you dig in enough, you find 9 times out of 10, what you would have built if you had just taken their order versus what you build when we really figure out what the problem is usually shorter. Like a lot of times it's Karen Barr was talking, it's a job aid, or it's something that they just need for performance support, that we don't need this big thing, 2-minute YouTube type videos, right? She was talking, they do that a lot, little quick 2-minute video. This is how the generation likes to learn now anyways. I need to fix my plumbing, I go watch a YouTube video. I actually watched one on how to put my new grill together. So it's really important, I think, to recognize something might take longer if we actually have a performance problem that we have to fix. But if a lot of times it could be part of a process, it could be, I think it was one of the other folks was talking about, do they have the right tools to do their job? One of the things I find all the time is broken processes. I don't know if you guys have that, but the process has evolved over time and the training hasn't kept up and people just don't understand the process. And so some of those fixes are outside of us. We help support them. The learning business partners do what we call IDD Lite, which is, you need a job aid created, you create it. We don't need the IDD team to do that necessarily. It's really just a glorified SOP with some pictures on it. Do that. That will fix the problem. So not everything has to be a long process. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. And the business is just like, what? Wait a minute, what are you doing? That's going to take forever. I totally
Especially
understand.
when they would come to us and say, can you build us a video? And we would say, well, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's find out more about the need. Let me talk to some of your users.
Yeah. Yep.
And trying to dig in a little further where they were used to like, well, but what about my video?
Yeah. Well, okay, understand you want a video. I understand you want that. And what I love in Kathy Moore's book is she just says, I understand. And she just does her process anyway. I thought that was a brilliant approach. Yes, I'll take all of your PowerPoints. I'm not going to do anything with them, but I'll take them from you. I think it's just, again, having the role of the consultant. They don't know that you're there to actually help consult with them. And Karen in our group said, I loved it. She said, I don't even tell them I'm doing it. I just say, let me learn a little bit more about what you're asking for. Just tell me a little bit more. And in that way gets them talking about why they want it, and what the performance is that they're trying to fix, which is, they're all wonderful techniques in consulting. Jill, what else do we have?
So I am thinking, because I know you have a few stories to share with us yet,
Yep.
and it's 10:15.
Yep.
We do still have this question from Gary.
Yeah, I want to address that.
Posted beforehand. So Gary, do you want to just summarize your question quick, and we can address that, and then I think we'll go back to your few remaining stories here.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thanks, Pamela. Pleasure to be on and to hear a lot of good insight from everybody else. I think I was just initially following this PBLF model in regards to everything that maybe was more soft skills or on the job skill, thinking of those types of interaction. And then I was also trying to reapply it back to my current situation, where we always start with product training, because our support specialists have to at least know the basics of setting up, let's say, our product before we can go out there and be great customer service representatives. And so I'm just curious, any thoughts on applying this PBLF model directly with that, or is it really more focused for these job specific skills?
No, I would tell you that anything that somebody says is about knowledge, in the end, they have something they want somebody to do with that knowledge, right? So everything comes to performance, even knowing something. I think the IDD question in this situation, and we're tackling this right now because we have thousands of products, and our sales reps, their heads are going to explode with all the information they need to know. And so what I always say is, what do you want them to do with the knowledge? So if it's, I need to be able to answer a question on the spot, on the call, okay, then we need to build really good performance support where they can find the answer quickly. That's what we have to do for you. We all know our brains have very small bandwidth. Our memories are horrible, if you know anything about the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And so what do they absolutely need to know in the moment to answer a question, to show credibility, whatever they need? If it's a sales rep or if it's a call center agent, what do they need to know in the moment that we can really drive into their long-term memory? Other than that, it's about performance support, because you don't want them to just know it. You want them to know it because you need them to do something with it. There's always a performance element, even if it's a knowledge topic, or we wouldn't be talking about it. The business wouldn't care. They wouldn't bring it up. Why do they need to know this? And my years at United Healthcare, I led sales training for a couple of United Healthcare's divisions. And I always saw my job as protecting the brains of our sales reps, because if I had let everybody put everything in there that they wanted to put in their heads would have exploded. I really, people think people remember stuff more than they do. And so I think we have to just always be the ones to say, what will they need in the moment? Oh, okay, let's create an online, search place that they can find that information, or something that helps their performance in the moment, because they're not going to remember everything that you want to tell them. And I mean, we can go through the process of, telling them all that stuff, but it'll be gone. It's going to be gone in a day. And I'll tell a quick story. I had a CFO who was putting in a new computer system, and he wanted to know why I was being so obstinate about training people a month before the system came out. And he was really upset about it. And I said, listen, I'm not being obstinate. I know you love food. What did you have for lunch a month ago? And he goes, I don't know. I said, exactly. They're not going to know one thing that we train them a month from now about a computer system, because they're not going to care about it till they have to use it. So I think that's the key thing is, what do they need to remember, and what can they look up? And the looking up and making the looking up easy, that's part of our job too, is making the looking up easy and finding that stuff. Thanks. I really appreciate your question, Gary.
No, thank you.
Any other chat topics, Jill?
I think we can move back, since we have just
great.
10 minutes remaining.
Yep.
Let's make sure you get to tell us anything else that you want to tell us.
Yep. And we have a poll at the end. I want to hear everybody's feedback. So, all right. So let's move ahead. I'll just do really quick success stories. Now, these are actual slides. I think I mentioned before that our vice president in our town hall would share these. And so these are some examples. I'm not going to read through all of these with you, but this first one was really about resources and training tools. They were transitioning my HR, and they wanted to make sure that everybody knew what they needed to do, right? The managers, they felt, weren't equipped, right? And so in the PBLF mindset, there was a lot of interviewing that went on. We did the MAP-IT process. We used the action mapping. And what we found in the end was there was only 3 issues that were a problem. And it really wasn't even a training need. It was just having performance support again. So this was a huge success story. They had come wanting, oh my gosh, probably I would say 200 hours worth of IDD work. And it ended up being, it didn't even come to the hub. We didn't even do it because it was something simple enough that we could just give job aids. So that was a great success story. There was a purchaser program for pharmaceuticals. We called it Builds and Burns, training and performance support. Again, same kind of a thing. These were all the recommended solutions that we came up with. They had wanted a full-blown training program. It was a job aid, a short video, a little bit of scenario-based courses to practice completing a spreadsheet. The whole thing, the whole performance that they wanted was for these people to complete a spreadsheet correctly. But that isn't how they came to us. They said, we need a full-blown training program on builds and burns and how the pharmacists have to do this spreadsheet. And we're like, let's dig in here and let's find out what you really want. And when we did, the business was delighted, but it didn't look anything like what they had come to us with in the beginning of the request. And I thought that was a huge success. And again, we had the LBPs and the IDDs talk as a team about these at our town hall, which was awesome. And then the last one I wanted to share was we created an unconscious bias course a couple of years ago. We're in our 3rd iteration, our 3rd year of doing this type of work for DE&I. And we had created this unconscious bias course based upon our interactive scenarios that really, there was no right answer. It was a good, a better, and a best answer that people could give. This was the one I referenced before where they said I had never encountered something so challenging and having to think through which response was the best response. But that was really overwhelmingly positive feedback, and we got a Brandon Hall Gold for that. So we're pretty proud of that. And it really was a great example of the use of PBLF, because when my DE&I folks had came to us, they wanted us to do an online course and drill into people's heads that, these concepts are important to the business. And this was the one where the vice president said to me, you can't go right into the activity. You're going to have to tell them some facts up front. And I said, you know what, I can do that. I'll put the facts in the activity. How about that? We'll put the facts in the activity and they'll learn that way. And that is exactly what happened. So some data there that was rolled out globally, 33 countries, over 2,500 elective completions. And their management incentive plan was based upon getting this done. So very great feedback on this, and illustrated for me that realistic interactive scenarios that make people pick the best choice work, and they make people think, and it sticks. And I think that's kind of how I want to wrap up today. Doing this the way that focuses on performance is going to get you a business result. But you have to know upfront what you're trying to achieve before you get started. And so, Mark, I think we've got a poll that we were going to do now.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
I wanted to see your opinions on this, because I do think healthcare and the healthcare industry is unique. For those of you not in healthcare, play along anyway. And again, no right answer on this one. It's just your opinion. We got about 34 people who have responded. Anyone else? I'm going to close the poll here in a minute. Think about your options. All right, so let's end the poll. So every learner impacts a patient somehow. That's my favorite answer in these choices. So everyone in the healthcare system is going to impact somebody who's a patient, and the best we can do to help them perform means the patient experience is improved. I do think, again, knowledge does not equal improved performance is huge. And the example I love to give on that one is, I can show you a bike. I can teach you how bikes work. You could even take that bike apart. Doesn't mean you can ride one. And so that performance is where you want to head. And you can have knowledge as part of the equation. You have tests as part of the equation. But at the end, everybody wants something in terms of improved performance. And even new hires. Speed to productivity is a great example. So I appreciate the time today, Jill. That's all I had. Really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. I hope you all enjoyed it as well.